I was lucky enough to invite Hugo Chavez to the British Parliament in 2006. I found him a fantastically charismatic figure, but far more important than his charisma were his politics, because he transformed Venezuela, and in the process of transforming Venezuela also transformed Latin America, and in turn gave great hope to us here in Europe that change is possible, that neoliberalism can be challenged. A great man who'll be written up brilliantly in history.
And I first met Chavez in 1999, and we had a very long interview, and I travelled around the country with him, and I thought he was the most extraordinary, interesting and lovely man. And I wrote a book about him, which has gone into several editions in many languages. And I think Chavez is one of the really, really great figures of the last century, and possibly of the last 2 centuries. He might go down in history as he would like to be remembered as the heir to Simón Bolívar, because he promoted and was successful in trying to unify the countries of Latin America outside the ambit of the United States.
I just want to say a few words about what's so important about the Chavez and the Bolivarian Revolution. It has, over the past few years, shown that there is an alternative to austerity, to help working people. Particularly in Venezuela, it's impressive that the new labor code that was brought in under Chavez did a fantastic job in helping workers get decent employment rights following many, many years of repression and the attacks on trade unions in that country. I think what has happened in Latin America has been fantastic. It's helped other countries like Ecuador, like Bolivia, and other states in Latin America pull themselves up and show that there is an alternative, and that they are prepared to stand up to the bullying and harassment that we get sometimes from the United States. In particular, we're very concerned that even after many, many years of Latin America being treated as America's backyard, we thought Obama would be different. Unfortunately, with the statements of Kerry and others recently, it shows that we're back to where we were perhaps in the 1960s and 1970s. But I don't believe they'll be able to overturn these revolutions. I think that the democracy is strong in these countries, particularly in Venezuela, and that with the election of Maduro, it'll go forward for the future.
When I visited Venezuela in 2009, one of the things that struck me was the amount of redistribution of land that there'd been, both in the countryside and increasingly in the cities. I was particularly interested in this because it's an issue of food sovereignty, and although Chavez is known, and the Chavistas are known for improving the health and the education prospects, living prospects for people, I think less is known about the redistribution of land and the move towards food sovereignty. Food sovereignty is about food being grown in the country where it's being eaten, and there being enough food for everybody, and food being equally distributed and cheaply available. And this is one of the really important things of Chavez's legacy.
And one of the most inspiring things about Venezuela and the revolution that's taking place there is the fact that young people are really being championed, and life chances are really being expanded, whether that's through massive investment in education, giving everyone the right to free education at all levels, whether it's making sure that young people are not left on the scrap heap like they are over in Britain and across Europe today, by providing jobs, by going for growth, and really building a sustainable economy and investing in the future, which is its young people. Fantastic programs such as El Sistema, which is giving people the opportunity to learn musical instruments, and all these things really show that the government and the revolution really does have the interests of young people and its future at its heart. And all the best to that ongoing progress. Viva Venezuela.
Under Chavez, the position of women was transformed massively, and women have been leading and taking part in the revolution at every level, from community and local level right up to leading whole areas of policy and heading up executive branches, legislative branches. And that's incredibly inspiring to women here, where our representation is being thrown back. We still have a massive gender pay gap, and women face many barriers in the formal labour market. Measures such as the labour law introduced last year and the social missions have really meant that equality means something to women in Venezuela and they're able to advance their liberation.
The legacy of Chavez is immensely progressive. There is no question about it that he's transformed that society after recognition in the way he found it in 1998. Poverty has been reduced by more than half. Unemployment has been reduced to single figures. The amount of inclusion of people has been by the millions. 24 million out of 28 million people actually have free health. The amount of education has been increased at the primary, secondary and tertiary level, higher education. Society is being massively democratized. The population have participated. There were 10 million people registered in the electoral register in 1998. Now it's nearly 20 million. The level of participation, because of despondency and cynicism with the previous system, led to very small turnouts at elections. Now the turnouts are between the region of 78-80%, which is a massive achievement. And participatory democracy allows communities to be empowered and participate in everything. Of the total, black people have been recognized, indigenous people have been recognized as special rights, but of the total, if you look at society in its totality, the section of society that has been seen the best improvement, there is no question about it, in the overall is women. So in this sense, the revolution is immensely progressive.
Chavez said education was a human right and a social duty, and that really encapsulates everything. He put it into the Constitution and turned it into actions, not just words. In his time, he actually changed the whole landscape for education. People who hadn't been able to access education, even very basic education, were able to study. And now he has 83% of the population are going on to higher education. This is absolutely amazing. For the same group of the population here, it's 43% access higher education, and they're having to pay £9,000 a year tuition fees on top of all their living costs and so on. It's making it inaccessible for increasing numbers of our young people, whereas in Venezuela it's free, genuinely free. It's responsive, it's in the heart of its communities, and that's what education really should be. And the legacy is fantastic because they've got a well-educated population that is willing to help and show solidarity across the world.
I think it's clear now that after the death of Hugo Chavez and the election of his successor, that Chavez has been an enormously important historical figure, not only in Venezuela but for the whole of Latin America, and also an inspiration globally and internationally, because he spearheaded the progressive tide that has swept a whole region in Venezuela, starting with his own election in 1998, where he led the process of change throughout the country and the region, which saw the election of a whole string of social democratic and more radical socialist governments that attacked social and racial inequality, that began the process of building and constructing a new regional integration, really a new independence for Latin America. The first time that Latin America has really been independent in 500 years of history, building new forms of grassroots democracy, standing up to American and global Western interference in the region, standing up for the independence of the region, and really creating in real life a new form of socialist change in the 21st century. It's been said that socialism was dead after the end of the Cold War, but actually what's happened in Latin America and starting in Venezuela is that you're starting to see the construction of a new form of socialism in our time. And Chavez and Venezuela have been central to that. It's been said that Chavez was some kind of dictator. That's absurd. He and the Chavista movement have now won 17 elections and referendums in a process that has been internationally recognized as being powerfully democratic and fraud-proof in a way that elections in a lot of countries are not. And it's been said that he ruined the Venezuelan economy. If you look at the actual facts, on the ground in terms of growth, inequality, poverty reduction, even inflation, which is a problem now in Venezuela today. There's been a huge improvement in Venezuela compared with what happened before. But it's really his role as a champion of the poor and the oppressed, a champion of regional Latin American integration and independence, and a voice and a standard bearer for a new form of socialism in the 21st century, that I think he will be remembered, and his influence and legacy will live on long after his death.
And I think Chavez is so important for Latin America, the Caribbean and the rest of the region, because he showed another world is possible. He put helping the poor, raising living standards of the very poorest at the top of his agenda, and he stood up to the United States. That's a really important example to set.
Hugo Chavez government, and I believe the government most recently elected, will continue to build on social progress. Social progress means real jobs, trade union freedoms, rights for indigenous people, and hugely importantly, rights for women to childcare and other benefits in work. What's crucial underpinning all of this is the investment of the country's wealth in universal access to healthcare and having already eliminated illiteracy.
The Chavez government recognised the importance of culture in any revolution, and communities in Venezuela have, under the Chavez government, felt recognised. They've been able to participate by nominating for themselves what they consider their cultural heritage to be. So rather than defining what the national cultural identity is from above, which might exclude large sectors of the population, particularly indigenous, African descended, mixed race, lower classes, these peoples have all been able to nominate what they feel their cultural identity to be, and that's been included in official representations of the country's cultural heritage.
And we recognize that the great contribution that Hugo Chavez has made to the region is of immense value, not only to Latin and South America, but especially for the Caribbean islands. Apart from the help that we've had financially, with the support with oil, with Petrocarib and with ALBA, with other support that is happening in the region, we know that just having someone who is there as a beacon, holding out to the rest of people in the Caribbean that another way is possible, that we can actually have policies that will affect the vast majority of people, the poor and the dispossessed. And we value that very much. So we support the revolution, we support the Bolivarian revolution, and we will continue to do that throughout this very difficult period that is coming up. Thank you.
Primarily because the social programs that he has instituted and brought about in Venezuela for the people has empowered them. As a trade union lawyer, the rights that he's given to trade unionists in particular, rights that will give them and empower them from day one against dismissal, to participate in their workplaces, is absolutely wonderful. And that to me is what democracy is about. And that to me is what any lawyer in this country would give their hind teeth for. We are trying in this country at the moment to get basic trade union rights reinstored for British workers, and Venezuela already has that. And so we have great lessons to learn just on the human rights issues in Venezuela, and that's why I support President Hugo Chavez's legacy.